we're pointing at the website of the White House, specifically the link to the document submitted as an authentic document in response to, I guess, Donald Trump's persistent requests for birth certificate from President Obama. Now, what's interesting here is that I'm loading this document. I want you to see what I think is rather disturbing. Now, I'm reloading the document. Sorry for the flash there to CNN, but I'm doing it so that you see the document loads in layers. As you see the white text, or there's a white layer that loads, and then the text comes on top of it. And that made me pretty suspicious, because a scan would not load that way. So I decided to take a look at what's going on inside this document, and one of the things that you see is that the loading of this document as it occurs from the website directly, when that document is loaded into Illustrator, is easy to deconstruct. So I'm going to save this now and then deconstruct it with you and show you what's going on. So if you believe in this document, I don't think you will by the time we're finished here. The document information may be real, but the document was clearly manipulated and adulterated. Now, my background is not only involved in the financial business as I am now, but previous incarnations I worked in graphics and special effects for a lot of very high-end projects. So I'm very familiar with Adobe products, from Adobe Illustrator to their whole production bundle and After Effects and Photoshop and all this stuff for the last 20 years, basically before it was even popular. They had the Photoshop before it was even called Photoshop, and it was developed for a company called Barney Scan, actually. So anyway, we're looking at this document, and what you see immediately is that as I mouse over it, I'm seeing individual elements are highlighted, and here you can see a list of those elements. This is the background, and you notice there's white spots on there, and there's lines. Now, somebody had to create, or some computer program had to create, the separate distinctive areas. Now, here's the text, and when you see those knockouts, which you just saw in that little snippet, we're seeing these layers of black text put on top of them. And so I'm highlighting the date. I'm highlighting a couple different elements. Here's another date. I believe this one is the one that's down in the corner, where you see the 1961. And see, this date only has some of the numerals in it, which is another thing that's strange, because it would not be logical for a computer program that makes a PDF as a scan to arbitrarily pick out just those letters and turn them into one object. So what we have is individually selectable objects which are random, not consistent, and not systematic. Additionally to that, we have no proper aliasing on the edges of the text, which would have some sort of softening and chromaticism, and the elements that are there can be moved around. Now, this should not be possible. If Photoshop, if a scan created an image, then entire segments of the image, the entire segment of the image would be movable around inside a bounding box, not in individual elements. Now, when I move the background, you see that I have white areas that are knockouts. These are not possible for me to believe that they were created by a computer program, because they're arbitrary. There's no reason for them to be there. That has to be done manually, and when you zoom in, which we'll do in a second, then you can see just how artificial and strange they look. So now we have these layers. I'm going to show you how the document's constructed on a big picture. So we're going to hide the background. There's the background being hidden. Now you see that the text layers are there. Those are all construction. And now you see, when I hide that background layer, you see that the lines disappear also, which is strange. And now you see when I hide the main text layer that we have a few little areas left which are kind of random. Now, if this kind of thing were able to be actually created systematically, then what would happen is that this would be filled with all sorts of independent objects. It's not. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 objects or something like that, distinctly, and those are the black objects, and they're put on a background which now has this nice, neat little gradient on the side, which may indeed come from a scan, but it's layered in there, or could be easily have been created with a standard gradient. Now here we are looking at this date, and what you see is the densities on this date don't match up, and there's a knockout behind it. Now, there's one thing that a computer program does not have the ability to do, is to see behind an object that has been scanned. And what we're seeing is that in order to create that knockout and to place this on top of it, the computer program would need to have been able to see behind the object. And they can't do that. So this is not possible. That it could be systematically produced. We also have a density problem, which you can see I was able to correct by simply using a different calculation method for transparency. So, there you see the lighter densities, and the 1, 9 and the 1 in the year are all darker, and they're embedded in the main text block. The date with the August 8th is moved around, and makes me question what's going on there. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually show you how I would have done this, so you don't get the haloing. And then I'm not going to show you how I would have created the aliasing so that it looked real, and it would look like a scan. But I certainly would have saved the document in a flattened form so that it was distinctly scan-like and showed up with big contiguous areas of raster information as a single unit, not as these individually manipulable units. So here is this text block moved down, and I'm going to use the multiply command, which just simply adds it to the background instead of knocking it out. And I'm actually going to darken the densities of that, and then we'll be able to do a comparison. So what you can see already is that my bottom version looks much more real than the top version, and all I had to do was to use a different calculation method to place the object on top of the background. And that alone makes it very clear that there's something wrong with what was built in this document. The density shift also is a very strange, especially when you look at the word date, is segregated out there. It just doesn't make much sense. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the background here and create my own background and just show you generally how you could create this over the background without having any of that haloing, and the way that any reasonable Photoshop, Illustrator, any sort of document person would actually do this. So I'm going to isolate the background, actually create a new layer for it so that we can control that separately. And I'm just going to clone the layer of the background until I get the whole page filled in like they have it. And then we'll just put the text on top of it. Now, my layer will not have the grid in the background because I'm not going to take the time to do that, but it would be easy enough to actually put the lines on the background as well that I create, if I wanted to do so. So here's my layer as I created it. I can turn the background off just by turning the layer on and off. And I'm going to now create a mask of a section of this that has nothing on it, so this top section here will be good enough. And then I'm just going to clone this all the way down so that I have a full contiguous background, and then that will suffice for our background. Now what you can see in the top here is you see that little area of those little spots. This is another pretty strange thing. This is antiquing or some sort of attempt to disrupt, to make the document look like it has natural artifacts, I'm presuming. Now if you notice, there's a lot of little specks on this document, in the sense that the background has a lot of white areas. it doesn't make sense that you just have one little block up the top and a few other little random blocks, over the document, that have no consistency. So, and that's the thing. Computer programs are consistent. They're not just going to create 4 little flecks when there's an obvious pattern in the document that would create many more of them. So what I did here is I just cloned this, and I'm just sliding it around so that they all align, and now we have text on the background. And what you can see is that I'm using the multiply method to combine this, and I simply have a much more uniform calculation of the background into the foreground, or the foreground into the background, without the haloing. Now, instead of the haloing, what they should have done is actually created the chromaticism and the anti-aliasing that would normally happen in a scan or anything with a lens, and then that would have created the nice softer edges if they wanted it to look, kind of photographic, as what it appears they were trying to do. In any case, the fact that this document has layers, the fact that it doesn't have chromaticism, the fact that it has individually movable pieces, makes me very suspect. So I'm saving this in a PDF format with Illustrator editing capability, and I don't think this document stands to muster.